What happens when wealth and status can't protect you from humiliation? The store fell into a strange hush after the words left the little girl's mouth. The security camera overhead hummed faintly. A man in a suit, tall and graying at the temples, turned toward the voice that had cracked through his busy mind like a whisper in a church. Jerome Carter, once dubbed the invisible billionaire by Forbes for his knack of staying out of headlines despite a massive tech empire, found himself staring at a child not more than 8, clutching a baby wrapped in a faded towel. The girl's name was Anna. Her hair was tangled into uneven puffs, her hands filthy, her shirt stained, and her jeans ripped at the knees. The baby in her arms whimpered, hungry and cold. A bitter December wind blew outside, but it was the chill in the store that bit harder now. The cashier spotted them and snapped, "Hey, this isn't a daycare, get out." Anna flinched. She tightened her grip on the baby and looked down, already turning to leave, shoulders trembling. But Jerome stepped forward. His voice was calm yet firm. "She's not stealing anything," he said, holding the cashier's gaze. Jerome's thoughts raced. He couldn't help but think of the contrast between his world and Anna's. The disparity between his well-lit, temperature-controlled offices and the harsh cold of the streets that Anna and Elijah called home. How had he gone through life without truly seeing this before? He had always been the man in the room who controlled everything, a man of absolute power. And yet, standing before this child, that control seemed like a distant memory. The cashier's voice cut through the tension again, sharper this time, laced with judgment. "You're not welcome here. I said get out of here." The words hit Anna like a brick. Her small body stiffened, her shoulders trembling, and for a brief moment Jerome saw her fear. But she didn't move. She gripped the baby tighter as if the very act of holding him would shield them both from the world's cruelty. But what was she supposed to do? She wasn't just a child. She was a child fighting to survive. Jerome felt something shift within him, a sharp jolt that went deeper than he could explain. He moved closer to her, something in his chest urging him to do something. What was this pull? Jerome crouched down beside her, his heart heavy with confusion. "What's your name?" he asked softly, his voice steady but filled with an emotion he couldn't name. "Anna," she whispered, her voice low but clear. "And the baby?" "Elijah," she said, still clutching the baby to her chest. "He's one." Jerome's gaze softened. 1 year old. She was carrying her brother, the weight of his survival resting entirely on her. But she didn't look like a child. She looked like someone older than her years, a little girl forced to grow up too quickly. As the cashier stood there watching them, the cold atmosphere of the store thickened. The murmurs started again, people whispering in judgment. "She's just another homeless kid, can't even take care of herself. Her parents, I heard they're both in jail, who's gonna take care of them? Look at her, she looks like she's lived through a war." Jerome could hear it all. The disdain, the indifference that people had towards someone they saw as invisible. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't interested in his next business deal. He wasn't thinking about his stock portfolio or the high-profile meetings he had to attend. He couldn't ignore Anna's quiet desperation. There was a heaviness in her eyes, a look that said she had been dealt a hand far worse than any of them could imagine. Jerome's heart stirred. This wasn't just a simple act of charity. This was a chance to change something, a chance to do something bigger than himself. Jerome's internal conflict, reflecting on wealth and isolation. As Jerome stood there, his mind was a whirlwind. He had all the wealth, all the resources in the world, and yet he felt powerless. What good was his empire if it couldn't change the world for the better? What was wealth when children like Anna still suffered in the streets, when they were judged for things they couldn't control? Jerome had spent years building his empire, earning his place in the world. But as he stared at Anna, he realized something. His wealth, his status, none of it had prepared him for this moment. None of it had taught him how to fix the broken parts of the world that money couldn't reach. As the cashier finally backed off, watching them with an almost pitying gaze, Jerome's mind started to race. Could he really make a difference? Or was he just another person trying to feel good about giving a little? Would this change Anna's life, or would it just be another fleeting moment that would eventually fade? Jerome was about to say something when he saw Anna tighten her grip on her brother, her eyes brimming with something more than fear, defiance. And then, as if the world suddenly grew silent, she spoke again. "I promise to pay when I grow up," Anna repeated. The words hit like a shockwave. Her promise wasn't just about paying back a bill. It was a promise of hope in a world that hadn't given her any reason to believe in it. A promise to survive, to thrive, to make something of herself despite the odds stacked against her. The air shifted. The room felt smaller, and in the space between them there was a bond that neither could explain. Jerome had stepped into Anna's world, and somehow he couldn't walk away. He knew he couldn't walk away. The emotional weight of Anna's promise hung heavily in the air, and as they walked out of the store together, Jerome knew this was just the beginning. The cold wind stung against Jerome's face as he stepped out of the store with Anna and Elijah in tow. His thoughts were a tangled mess. Should he have stepped in? Did he do enough? The decision to intervene had come instinctively, but it wasn't a simple one. The words, "I promise to pay when I grow up," still rang in his ears, and they didn't sit well. Anna wasn't just asking for milk. She was asking for hope, for the chance to survive in a world that didn't care if she did. Jerome felt something shift inside him. He couldn't just walk away. He was the invisible billionaire, a man used to having control over everything, and yet here he was, powerless. Powerless against a little girl's fight for survival. His wealth couldn't change the world, but maybe, just maybe, it could change this one life. He glanced down at Anna, who was walking quietly beside him. The weight of the promise she made lingered, both between them and in the space he would have to fill. Could he really make a difference? Could a small act of kindness have ripple effects that reached farther than he could imagine? The answer was yes. Jerome knew what he had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. The stakes were rising. People were already starting to notice. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Jerome had reached out to a few local shelters, looking for a way to help. But every time he mentioned Anna's name or the situation, people seemed to treat him with suspicion. Was he just another billionaire with a publicity stunt? Was he doing this for the right reasons, or just to ease his own conscience? Jerome started feeling the weight of his decision. The more he tried to help, the more people doubted his motives. Was he really different from the others? Was his help just a temporary fix, something that would make him feel good but ultimately change nothing? At the same time, Anna's growing distrust of the world around her added another layer of complexity to the situation. The harsh reality of her life had taught her to be cautious of people. She had learned that promises were easy to break, and people rarely stuck around long enough to deliver on them. As Jerome tried to open doors for Anna, he could see it in her eyes. She was slowly building walls. With every kind word, every small act of kindness, it seemed like she was retreating a little more into herself. Trust was a foreign concept to her, and that hurt more than Jerome could understand. Meanwhile, his own past began to haunt him. Jerome had built his empire with precise calculations, with every decision made to bring him closer to the next milestone, the next deal. But in this moment, his wealth, his status, none of it mattered. He had no idea how to navigate this. The people who surrounded him in the world of wealth and business deals weren't the same as the ones who had to struggle to survive every single day. "Is this what I've been missing all along?" he thought. But it was too late for second guessing. The world around him was shifting, and it wasn't comfortable. The more he thought about Anna, the more he realized how little he truly understood about what it meant to live in her shoes. As the days wore on, Anna began to show signs of growth, but not in the way Jerome expected. Despite her wariness, She started to open up in small, unexpected ways. Jerome noticed her becoming a little more resilient, a little more willing to face the world. At the shelter where they stayed for the night, Jerome saw her helping another child. She handed him a toy, offering a smile that was so genuine, it almost broke his heart. She had learned how to care for others despite her own hardships. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about holding on to the humanity that hadn't been stolen from her yet. In contrast, Jerome began to notice just how empty his world felt. His wealth had given him power, but in this world, where survival was about trust and compassion, his money meant little. It couldn't buy happiness, and it certainly couldn't buy trust. Jerome was starting to realize that true wealth wasn't measured by numbers in a bank account. It was measured by the connections, the bonds, the lives you touched. Then the climax arrived in the form of a sudden twist that would change everything. One night after a particularly exhausting day, Jerome returned to find Anna in tears. She was sitting on the cold floor of the shelter, holding Elijah close, her face streaked with tears. "What's wrong, Anna?" Jerome asked, kneeling beside her. Anna looked up, her eyes filled with both anger and sorrow. "You promised. You said you'd help me, but this is just temporary. You're not really here for us. You're just another person who will leave when it gets hard." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Jerome froze, the weight of her distrust hanging heavy in the air. He had come to this point with every intention of helping. He had dared to step into a life that wasn't his own. But now, in the face of real, raw emotion, he realized how fragile everything was. Anna had seen through him. Her fear wasn't just about surviving. It was about losing the very people who had shown her kindness. It was about the constant heartbreak of people who promised things they could never deliver. Jerome stood, heart pounding. His internal conflict surged, his mind struggling to find the right words. Before he could speak, the door slammed open. A loud crash followed by a loud voice made everyone freeze. "Where is she?" Jerome turned to see a man storming into the shelter. His expression was twisted with anger. His words were clear. "Where is Anna?" This was the man Anna had been trying to escape. The man who had stalked her, whose threats had haunted her every move. And now he was here. The conflict was about to escalate in ways they hadn't imagined. Would Jerome be able to protect her, or would this man rip everything from them? The shelter was dark, but the tension in the air was palpable. Anna sat on the cold floor, her face flushed with tears as the man, the one from her past, stormed into the room. His footsteps were loud, echoing in the silence like a threat hanging over their heads. His voice cut through the room with an edge of authority, as if he had the right to demand answers, to take back control. "Where is she?" the man growled. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Anna with the kind of cold rage that made everyone in the room freeze. Jerome stood in front of Anna, his body tense, his heart racing. The man's presence was a reminder of Anna's trauma, of everything she had been trying to escape. Jerome's protective instinct surged, but the anger in the man's eyes made him question whether he could truly protect Anna and Elijah from this. Could a billionaire with no real understanding of this world save a child from her past? Anna's hand trembled as it rested on Elijah's tiny back. This wasn't just another moment. This was a reckoning. It was the moment Anna had feared, the moment her past collided with her hope for a better future. "Please," Anna whispered, but her voice cracked with the weight of years of pain. She couldn't escape her past forever. Jerome took a deep breath, his mind racing. Should he stand his ground? Should he use his influence to make this man back down? Or should he step aside and let Anna make this decision for herself? He was about to make a choice, and whatever happened next would reshape everything. The tension in the room escalated as Jerome's mind swirled. The man had already made his presence known, but now the real challenge began. Anna's freedom was on the line, and Jerome couldn't help but feel responsible. He had chosen to intervene, to offer help, but he hadn't anticipated how deep the emotional scars ran. He looked at Anna, her eyes filled with both fear and defiance. She wasn't the scared child anymore. She was fighting. Jerome realized in that moment that Anna's growth was the key to everything. He had been trying to change her life, but it was she who had to change her own destiny. The man took a step forward, but Jerome's hand shot out to block him. The words that left Jerome's mouth surprised even him. "You're not taking her back." His voice was calm, but it was clear. He wasn't backing down. The man glared at him, but the power dynamic had shifted. Jerome had done it. He had acted. In that instant, Jerome knew that no amount of wealth or status could protect them from the truth. The truth was, Anna was no longer alone. Jerome wasn't going to let her go, not this time. Not while she still needed him. The room fell into a quiet hush as the man hesitated. But there was something in his eyes, fear, respect. Whatever it was, it held him back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he took a step back. Jerome didn't take his eyes off the man. "You don't control her anymore. She's not your property." Anna stood up, her face a mixture of relief and pride. She had made a choice, a hard one, but it was hers. For the first time, she had stood her ground. She wasn't the scared girl anymore. She was someone with a voice, and she was no longer afraid to use it. The man walked out of the shelter, and for the first time, the weight on Anna's shoulders seemed to lift. But it wasn't just her burden anymore. Jerome had shared it. A week later, the world felt different. The shelter was quieter, calmer. Anna had begun to open up to those around her, and Jerome's heart had softened in ways he hadn't expected. He had done more than help her. He had helped himself as well. Helping Anna had reshaped him, giving him a sense of purpose he had never known. He stood at the window of the shelter, watching Anna play with Elijah, her laughter ringing out in the air. She was no longer the fragile, broken child she had once been. She had become resilient, and in doing so, she had taught him something he'd never learned in the world of business and power. Kindness was its own strength. He turned and found Anna looking at him. Their eyes met, and in that moment there was no need for words. She had trusted him, and in return he had trusted her. The camera pulled back, showing the shelter, not just a place of refuge, but a place of new beginnings. Anna, Jerome, and Elijah were no longer trapped in their pasts. They were moving forward, creating their own future. Jerome stood in the doorway, watching the small family he had helped rebuild. The hope in Anna's eyes made the sacrifices worth it. True wealth was no longer about the numbers in his bank account. It was about this moment, about human connection, trust, and change. "I guess this is what real wealth feels like," Jerome thought, his voice soft, barely a whisper. The camera focused on Anna, smiling at her brother, then shifted to Jerome's face, which finally carried the peace he had longed for. Days turned into weeks, and the world seemed to shift ever so slightly for Jerome, Anna, and Elijah. The moment of confrontation with Anna's past, the confrontation that had nearly broken her, was now a distant memory. But it was a transformational moment, one that marked the beginning of something new. Jerome had stayed true to his promise. He wouldn't leave them. His role wasn't just to be their protector, but to be their partner in this new journey. Together, they had begun rebuilding, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. But not everything was as simple as it seemed. Anna had started to trust again, but trust didn't come easily. Her journey of healing had begun, but it was fragile, held together by the small moments of joy they found in each day. She would sit with Elijah, teaching him how to play with toys, her laughter ringing out like a soft melody in the house. She was still the same little girl with the weight of the world on her shoulders, but now her eyes sparkled with a light that had been buried for far too long. One morning, Jerome walked into the living room and saw Anna drawing, something he hadn't seen her do in years. "What are you drawing, Anna?" he asked, his voice soft. She looked up, her eyes bright, the colors on the page vibrant and full of life. "A house," she said, her voice confident. "A real home, one with love." Jerome's heart swelled with pride. This was the resilience he had seen in her from the beginning, the same strength she had used to survive. Now she was starting to create something for herself, a home, not just a shelter. Despite the progress, Jerome was struggling in his own way. His wealth, his business empire, all the things that had once defined him, now felt empty. He had learned a harsh truth. Money couldn't buy the connection he had with Anna or the fulfillment he found in helping her. He had come to a realization that had changed him at his core. He had built his life on a foundation of success, but he had never truly considered the human side of that success. It was never just about climbing higher on the corporate ladder. It was about the relationships, the lives you touched. As he sat by the window, looking out at the city, he thought about the future. What was next for him? He had found his purpose in helping Anna, but how could he keep making a difference, not just in her life, but in the world? The answer wasn't simple, but it was clear he had to start. He couldn't just sit back and hope for change. He needed to be the change. As things seemed to settle, a shadow from the past loomed over them. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, the phone rang. Jerome picked it up, sensing something was off. The voice on the other end was familiar. "Jerome?" the voice asked, a mixture of surprise and hesitation. It was someone from his old life, someone he had left behind in pursuit of his wealth and status. "You need to come back, Jerome," the voice said. "There's a situation. Your company, it's falling apart." The weight of those words hit him like a ton of bricks. All the progress he had made with Anna, the new life they had started to build, it could all come crashing down with a single phone call. The old life was calling him back. As the conversation ended, Jerome was left standing in the middle of the room, a storm brewing inside him. The temptation to return to his old life, to put everything else aside and focus on his company, was almost overwhelming. But he looked at Anna, who was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around her drawing of their new home. Elijah was laughing, his giggles filling the room. In that moment, Jerome knew that this wasn't about business anymore. It wasn't about the money or the success he had always pursued. This was about family. This was about what he had now, not what he could gain. He had already made the choice to help Anna. Now it was time to make the hardest choice yet, leave the old life behind for good. The next morning, Jerome made his decision. He walked into the office and called a meeting with his top executives. "I'm stepping away from the company," he said, his voice firm. "The time has come for me to focus on something more important." His decision left many of his colleagues stunned, but Jerome knew, deep down, it was the only choice he could make. His wealth no longer mattered. The most important thing in his life was Anna and her future. As Jerome walked back to the shelter, his heart was heavy, but there was a sense of peace in his steps. He had made the choice to leave behind the world of business that had once consumed him, and now he could focus on the things that truly mattered. Anna was waiting for him when he arrived. She was sitting by the window, holding Elijah, her face filled with hope and gratitude. She had no idea the journey Jerome had just embarked on, but somehow she knew that this was the start of something new for them both. The camera pulled back, showing the three of them standing together in the small but cozy shelter. The sun was setting outside, casting a soft, warm glow over them. They were no longer just survivors. They were thriving. And as the world outside continued its chaotic rush, they had found peace in each other. Jerome smiled softly, looking at Anna. "We'll be okay," he said, his voice steady. And in that moment, he realized that true wealth wasn't something you could measure with money. It was something you created with the people you loved and the impact you made. True wealth lies in human connection, he thought. And he had found his true wealth in Anna, Elijah, and the life they were building together. Sometimes, the greatest success is not about what you achieve, but the lives you touch along the way. If you believe that kindness can change the world, share this story and inspire others to make a difference, just like Jerome did.